Hello and welcome to Planet Poetry. I'm Robin Houghton. Today I have for you another gem from the Planet Poetry archive, and this time it's American poet Kim Addonizio, who I spoke to in September 2021. I think this is one of my favourite interviews, so hope you enjoy. Today, I'm thrilled to be talking with Kim Addonizio. California-based Kim is the author of 7 poetry collections, 2 novels, 2 story collections, and 2 books on writing poetry, The Poet's Companion with Dorianne Laux and Ordinary Genius. She also has 2 word and music CDs, the wonderfully titled Swearing, Smoking, Drinking and Kissing with Susan Brown and My Black Angel. Kim's poetry has been translated into many languages and her collections have been published in China, Spain, Mexico, Lebanon and the UK. Her awards include 2 fellowships from the NEA, a Guggenheim, 2 Pushcart Prizes and other honours. Penguin published her memoir, Bukowski in a Sundress, Confessions from a Writing Life, and her latest collection of poems, Now We're Getting Somewhere, was published by W. Norton in March 2021. Kim Addonizio, welcome to Planet Poetry.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I wonder if you could start by way of introduction by reading a poem, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I will read this one that's in Wild Nights, which is the book that Blood Axe published in the UK.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a selected poems. And this is called White Flower, Red Flower, from some teaching that I do in Italy every couple of years. White flower, red flower. He spent a year playing death in La Traviata, ruining a camellia in the first act, and smoking a Gauloise in the last, while Violetta succumbed. Here in the former monastery, the monks succumbed, giving way to the 4 of us drinking Sagrantino and telling stories in the gravel courtyard under the pasta-shaped stars. Out in the olive orchard, a mouse succumbs to a screech owl, and down the hillside, the old painter who owns this place is yielding slowly to cancer. But today, she recited Montale's poem, The Sunflower Crazed with Light. And today we saw the white dog, whose job it is to guide a few sheep out of Chagall's canvases into the lushness of the present moment. That moment has already succumbed to the next, but here we still are, sitting at a small round table in the dark, drinking darkness from our glasses, growing dizzy with darkness. Past midnight now, the date turned over, date of my friend's birth, so more darkness is poured. In the Chiesa is a painting of Jesus emerging from his tomb, hatted like a Veneto farmer. In our room is a red-robed virgin, tiny adult savior on her lap. A cracked and mottled mirror on the marble-topped wood bureau, sepia family portraits on the walls. Grandio morirsi Giovanni, sang Pavarotti and Sutherland, Alfredo and Violetta. She with surprising brio for someone about to droop dead into her lover's arms. But what difference your age? Everyone's here until they're not. Gone, but in some weird way still hovering in the air, in a cracked mirror, in the eyes of those grandparents and great-aunts. Enter from stage left the red shock of wings, a disturbance in the trees, easily mistaken for wind.
Thank you. I just think that's such a beautiful poem. I saw it, I think, in Poetry Review, and it's now on my potting shed wall. I've got a wall of poems that I've chopped out of magazines and things.
Oh, beautiful.
Not your average poem about the possibility of death and dying and moving on. I thought it was typical of your work. It's in one stanza for the listeners, and it seems to kind of move from one thing to another, and yet it never goes very far away, and it's very unexpected, the detail. I like to reach for your work when I'm feeling stuck in some kind of, I'm trying to write and I'm just stuck in cliches. And how do you dig yourself out of cliches? And I find I've only got to read your work, and it somehow gives me a real kick. I sort of feel like I've had an electric shock, like this is how I should be writing. I was just thinking, for you, what happens when you're writing if you're feeling this isn't happening? I mean, do you just put it down and do something else, or are there any poets that you go to because you know they're going to give you a kind of a jolt of energy or something that's just going to get you going again?
Yeah, reading is so often the trigger for something to happen. You know, I look for those writers too that sort of trigger me and wake me up to language and get my writing going in some way, because I spend a lot of time, like every writer, beating my head against the wall and going nowhere and writing a lot of garbage and feeling like I can't write, and, you know, all those things that we all feel. And there are so many times like that. And reading is really the answer for me, to read someone whose language inspires me and wakes me up to some possibility or some idea or some so that's pretty important to me. Like Dennis Johnson is a writer who's, you know, wonderful prose writer who, if I'm writing prose, I will read his sentences and mine will become mysteriously just some fraction of a percentage better just by reading him and taking that in. But he's also a wonderful poet, which I mostly discovered after his death. So he's one of the writers. Lately, Diane Seuss is another one, American writer. Terrence Hayes. His sonnets for My Past and Future American Assassin. You know, it's changed throughout my writing life, who I read and who triggers me and what that triggers in my writing. And I'm always trying to look for new writers to inspire me and new ways to write so that I'm not writing the same way that I wrote my first book, say.
Yeah.
You know, now I'm on to my 8th or on something like that of poetry.
8th book of poetry, yeah. And you're right, as you say, you write short stories and novels as well, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
And also, as we heard in the biog, you've written books on the craft of writing.
Right.
You came to poetry relatively late, I suppose, kind of in your 20s, wasn't it? I mean, not that late, but did you feel at that point that you had to play catch up, that you had to do a lot of reading, or were you already someone who read and was, you know, in the poetry world? Or
yeah, well, I read, but not poetry. So I really discovered poetry at about the age of 28. I know I'd been exposed in school earlier, but nothing really stuck, you know. And I think I felt like I had to play catch up because I had been in music, and music, you know, I was very much behind in music, studying classical music when I first went to college with, you know, kids had been playing since they were 4. And I had never heard classical music before I tried to become a classical singer, which was crazy and which I eventually failed at. So when I discovered poetry and decided I needed to pursue it, you know, I think I was in my senior year of college. I dropped out a couple times when I was going back to school at San Francisco State. And I think I took a creative writing class my senior year. And so that was all new to me. And I felt like, well, God, everybody must know so much more. And I was in school with a lot younger people because of having dropped out a couple of times, you know. I was a bit older than the other students. I was 28 and graduating, and then I went to graduate school after that, so in my 30s. So, of course, you know, at the time I thought it was late. Now I look back and think that's nothing. These, you know, people go, oh my God, I'm turning 30 or 40, and I just laugh at them like, you're babies, you don't know.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I don't know about in America, but certainly in this country, you know, if you hit 35, then all the possible awards and things seem to drop away. The kind of, you know, the kind of things that say, yes, I'm now on the path of being a writer.
Yes. Yeah, I published my first book at 40. So
very inspirational story, I think. but you're clearly someone who's sort of, you said you failed at music, but clearly you were a very good musician, and it sounds like you're good at a lot of things.
I love music, and I'm a passionate amateur. You know, that's where I am with music. So I explore a lot of different instruments and play some of them competently and none of them masterfully.
I was very pleased to see that you're an admirer of Dante, and he crops up in your poems and in your book Ordinary Genius. I wonder if you might talk a bit about that and how you got into appreciating Dante. And you're going to read a poem, I think.
Yes, I'm happy to. Well, full confession, I haven't read the entire Divine Comedy.
Oh, that's fine.
Only the Inferno, although I have some sense of how it turns out. But I read the Inferno in John Charity's translation many years ago, and it just always stayed with me, and it's become one of those touchstone works, certain books or certain movies or plays or ideas become sort of important to you at different stages in your life, and you often go back to them. And I think that he's someone that I reach into to think about or refer to, in my own sort of private pantheon of words and thoughts and ideas.
Yeah. I wonder if you would read Blues for Dante.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I used it in Ordinary Genius, which is one of my books about writing, in order to sort of talk about how you can lie in poems, actually. So this is Blues for Dante Alighieri, and there's a quote from the Inferno, Canto 4, "Without hope, we live on in desire." So I was writing this poem about a wonderful trip to Italy with a lovely boyfriend, but I was interested in exploring that idea, without hope, we live on in desire. And that's really what created the tone and mood of the poem, which was not at all the tone and mood of the actual experience. And it's in a blues stanza. So, our room was too small, the sheets scratchy and hot. Our room was a kind of hell, we thought, and killed a half-liter of Drambuie we'd bought. We walked over the Arno and back across. We walked all day, and in the evening, lost, argued, and wandered in circles. At last, we found our hotel. The next day, we left for Rome. We found the Intercontinental and a church full of bones, and ate take-out Chinese in our suite, alone. It wasn't a great journey, only a side trip. It wasn't love for eternity or any such crap. It was just something that happened. We packed suitcases, returned the rental car. We packed souvenirs, repaired to the airport bar, and talked about pornography and movie stars. And you, as a Dante person, probably know that the last word in the Inferno is stars.
Indeed, yeah.
So that was also my little Dante tribute, along with the circles and other little
exactly.
things, right?
So I seem to have taken you on a kind of Italian trip here.
It's my heritage, so.
So you said it was in a blues pattern. I'm not familiar with that. Is that like a particular form?
Yeah, one of the standard blues forms is a line and then a repeated line that often may torque it slightly, and then a third line that's kind of a turn. So it rhymes A as a form. Uh-huh. And so I take some liberties with that, but that's the basic structure of the piece. Okay. Yeah.
And it even looks a little like the terza rima of the comedy in its 3 lines.
Right, and it's also in 3-line stanzas. That's the blues form, so it's kind of
that's cool.
Yeah, a nod to the terza rima too.
And quite a lot of 11-syllable lines in there as well, I see, as well. Quite very clever.
Yeah, you got it, because, it takes someone to know some of that stuff to really unlock those other levels.
You can sometimes unlock the other levels, but even if you don't, there's still plenty in there to enjoy and appreciate. That's good poetry, isn't it?
Yeah, I just want there to be a there, like I wanted to have something on the surface that will draw anyone in, that anyone can get or mostly get or feel whatever is there. But then I want there to be something further if they investigate. If they really decide to take a deeper dive, there are things to find.
Which is fun. Makes it fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love that.
Now, in Mortal Trash, you've got a sequence of sonnets after Shakespearean sonnets. So they're numbered, aren't they? The number of the Shakespearean sonnet and the number of your kind of response to.
Right.
I was fascinated by these. I'm not really all that familiar with all the sonnets, obviously, some of the famous ones. And one or two of these sonnets of yours, I was left sort of thinking, wow, my head's going to explode, not quite sure what's going on here. And yet I absolutely love them. Can you give me a bit of background to this?
Yeah, as you probably know, there is a sort of drama of the Shakespeare sonnets. I think there are 154, something along those lines. And there's a sort of drama there where the poet, who's an older man, basically falls in love or has a connection to this younger man and is urging him to have children and all of these things. And then eventually, towards the end, there are these Dark Lady sonnets where there's a love triangle happening, basically. And there's a lot, of course, about mortality and living on and how you might live on in art or children. And so what I did was I flipped the script so that it's about an older woman in love with a younger one. And then a dark gentleman comes into the sonnets. And I did it I did 14 of them altogether. Right. So it's sort of an overall uber sonnet with a lot of sort of Vulcan mind meld with Shakespeare mixed in. And I can't remember how I got that idea, but I just started reading Shakespeare and looking for and I don't think I had ever actually read the entire oeuvre of Shakespeare sonnets either. So, and then I was reading them, and I was also reading Helen Vendler's criticisms and learning about a lot of the things that were going on in them. And that just really got me interested in this idea of a way to sort of use them for my own nefarious purposes. and that's what happened.
And some of them are sort of impossible to read, aren't they? Out loud, I mean, because you've got kind of lines of brackets and symbols and things. It's like some computer code gone nuts or something.
There was one it literally was just a mistake on my computer, and I looked at it and I went, that's kind of perfect for that line because it's let me not to the marriage of true minds, right?
Yeah.
And it's a moment when the speaker is very jealous because the younger lover is getting married. The woman is being with someone else. And so it made perfect sense for the sort of the typography to go crazy at that moment, like your head is exploding with this feeling.
I sort of imagine your publisher looking at that and saying, "Is this right?"
I know.
That was pretty funny. Would you like to read one of them, or one or two of them, or
yeah,
even,
I'd love to.
If you have your Shakespeare to hand, you could read the original first if you wanted.
I do, in fact. There's one I'd love to read you.
Excellent.
This is Sonnet 57. And it's a very kind of, on the surface anyway, a very abject sonnet, a sort of, I'm a fool for you. But then again, I feel there's an underlying sort of screw you note of potential irony and sarcasm here, or a self-recognition that, oh God, I'm so pathetic, kind of. And that was what I was working off of. So I'll read the Shakespeare and then read my version.
Great.
Being your slave, what should I do but tend upon the hours and times of your desire? I have no precious time at all to spend, nor services to do till you require. Nor dare I chide the world without end hour, whilst I, my sovereign, watch the clock for you. Nor think the bitterness of absence sour, when you have bid your servant once adieu. Nor dare I question with my jealous thought where you may be, or your affairs suppose, but like a sad slave stay and think of naught, save where you are how happy you make those. So true a fool is love that in your will, though you do anything, he thinks no ill. So you can hear a little bit of the sort of doth protest too much in that, in a certain way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a real truth in that, in the way he's feeling, that those feelings of jealousy and pain. So here's my 57. I hate hearts. Please don't have one. I wish you wouldn't call me. I'm not waiting by the phone, by the light of the clock. In fact, I'm really busy right now, describing things. That takes a lot of time. You'd be surprised how much drinking and looking out the window it requires. There's not much room for anything else. All I need is a closet, really, a little space for a shoe. And I can live on crackers, no problem. I love crackers. Are you eating some now? What do they taste like? Are you taking them in your mouth, then kissing? My princess, I remain your sickening servant.
That is brilliant, isn't it? I mean, actually, that first line grabbed me anyway. I was going to ask you about first lines because I think quite often that you do the killer first line thing. I mean, I hate hearts, please don't have one. We all want to read on as soon as we've read that. Is this something that you advise students on or pull them up on? Like, that first line it's got to grab you, really, hasn't it?
It does. I believe in those kind of first lines that there are certainly lines of poems and stories and novels that start slowly, and that's great. But I am a fan of sort of grabbing someone right away and saying, hey, I have something to tell you, or seducing someone into a poem. And so the first line is so important to me, and I may be writing along and not finding it, but when I find it, it's like a kind of energy field almost. And then I want the poem to sort of live up to that energy and run on that energy. And it doesn't necessarily happen in the first draft, but if I can get a line like that to get started with, it seems to allow some kind of an energy in that I might be able to follow.
Yeah.
Some kind of a flow. And often, this has been said often about poems, that in drafts of poems that there's sort of the warm up, the throat clearing, the on ramp. And often in student poems, I will help them to see that they've done that for a few lines, and then they hit the money line.
Yeah.
And that's the line you want to begin with.
Yeah.
That's the place where the energy really starts. And that's, for me, where I want the poem to start.
I think that's really good advice. Absolutely. And talking of energy, in your book, Ordinary Genius, and you say, go carefully into the territory of the explicit. Is this something that you go into carefully yourself? So I feel that you have no fear as to where you're going to go. And quite often, I'm left jaw dropped sometimes, like, whoa, did she really say that? And yet it's so effective and so integral to what you're expressing.
Yeah, well, I mean, for some people, it's not, those kinds of words are not natural to use, and there's no reason to graft them on your vocabulary. I mean, you have to, you be you,
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
that is,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You be you, and the territory you go into should not be someone else's. It should be your own. Mm-hmm. And that's really important, to find your own territory. But, in my case, I grew up hearing fuck you around the house quite often, so it's sort of part of my vocabulary, for better or worse. But I'm also aware that, you don't want to use it for just sort of pyrotechnics or shock effect. You want to think about when you're using it and why you're using it. Any kind of, all words really, but particularly if you're going into certain kinds of diction, you want to be aware of what that is, and you don't want to use it gratuitously. It should be in some way integral to what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
I've taken some words out sometimes because I realized I've gone back and looked and said, oh my God, I've said shit again. I really didn't need to say it that many times. Or in a collection, I'll suddenly see some word that just seems to appear. It begins to look like a facial tic to me that I want to sort of smooth over in some ways.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you to read a poem called Florida. And part of the reason, I thought we'd lead into this gently, but part of the reason is, it's just, I remember reading it and seeing the title. And again, titles I find titles really hard myself. I'm always making up rubbish titles, but Florida, okay, something happened in Florida, sunshine, Trump or something. And it kind of goes in a completely different direction entirely. So it's just one of those poems that makes you want to sort of, not quite sure whether to laugh or not. Am I allowed to laugh? That kind of thing. So I don't know what you think about that. Is that the reaction you're after?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Florida. And then there was the man who said, you look fatter with your clothes off, and like a fool I didn't put them back on, but climbed into his bed beneath the little Tibetan prayer flags and several images of Buddha haloed by a white light I wished at that moment to dematerialize into, especially when he asked me to get on top, but facing away from him, so that I rose up and slid down, looking at the knees and naked feet of someone whom an hour ago I'd found attractive. In a way, I realized it was now a blessing not to have to look into his eyes, but still, Being fucked backwards while facing a stain on the wall that resembled Florida was not quite the encounter I had envisioned, standing in the bookstore that the Beats with their Blakean visions and wholly passionate excesses had made famous. And my mind began to wander in order to avoid being present for whatever was going on down there. Eternally, it seemed. And was that really his penis? It felt like a speculum as he groaned, and I gazed at Florida, thinking of orange groves, and all the nights in Pompano Beach my brothers and I played lighthouse tag, dodging the beam that swept over the black sea and pale sand. And of all the days I spent shirtless, climbing palm trees, or squatting with a stick over a washed-up blue translucent man-o'-war quivering in the wind. And of the time I dug a sandpit, hoping to trap my crazy, violent older brother, anchoring the sharp swords of sticker plants upright in the bottom, covering the hole with a blanket and just enough sand. And how was I going to lure him in there? Maybe I could get him to chase me. He was always chasing me. I could feel my anger and the great happiness of impending revenge, imagining him falling in, wishing I could cover him over and bury him forever. While somewhere in the orange-scented light of a candle in the universe behind me, my lover finished, and I closed my eyes, and never, until now, turned around to look at him, sinking beneath the surface of the bed like a drowning sailor, thrown overboard from a great ship that centuries ago rounded the Cape and sailed on to another world.
That's a great poem, isn't it? What a story.
Thank you.
Something else you say in your book about, and this is something that crops up, this business of using the I, first person. Maybe if you're not comfortable with using I, is to go into it like the third person. I kind of like the idea of taking the third person and then going into the I, and then people assume it is you. Do you find you change from third person to first person or the other way around from time to time?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, when I was first writing and I had a very plain style, sort of influenced by early C.D. Wright, who was influenced by Frank Stanford. And it, a lot of their poems would begin, a woman does this, or a man does this, or a man and woman do this. And I sort of adopted that myself early on. The way you do, you imitate, which I think is a great way to learn. You begin by sort of imitating your heroes and then gradually making it your own. And so I think I did that at the beginning a lot more than I do now, where I feel very comfortable that the I is a kind of persona and that I'm stepping on a stage like a singer-songwriter. We don't necessarily assume that all their songs are directly autobiographical when they're singing about lost love, or when a singer is selling a song that they have not written, right? But it's totally believable because they find, or an actor is performing a role that is not them, and yet they're reaching into parts of themselves to create that role. And that's what I feel I do in poems. And I'm very comfortable with that now. I'm here to write the poem and say what I have to say. Yeah. And people will take all kinds of things from it, some of which I intended and some of which I didn't. And I have no control of that, once it leaves. There are things I put there, but who receives them and how they receive them is very individual. And that's beautiful. That's what makes it art.
I'm with you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I wondered if you might read the poem about your daughter, which is very beautiful. The name that means holy in Greek. Is that true? Does it mean holy in Greek? It
does. Yeah. It's one meaning of many that we found out. Her name is Aya, A-Y-A, Aya Cash. She's an actress. And this is one that I wrote for her, one of a few that I've written for my beautiful, lovely daughter, as all daughters are beautiful and lovely.
Of course.
So this is name that means holy in Greek. Today I heard your name shouted by a short-order cook, flipping scallion pancakes in a grease-grimed Chinese restaurant. He said it meant wow, which is the best word I know for the unutterable sublime. Wow is how I had the dumb luck to become your young and terrified mother, not knowing how to hold you in the hospital parking lot while your father got the car. It seemed to take a long time. Wow, it seemed to take 10 minutes for you to get your driver's license and move away to New York. I remember the moment we made you and knew we had. Your father lifting himself up off the bed and laughing. Little hawk, Sumerian goddess, Kachina that races the wind. The verses of the Quran are ayahs. In Japanese, full of color or beauty, though once inked for me as tomorrow's arrow. The secret ingredient in the chef's special, a marinade containing ayah. First word spoken by a rose. Last word the trees say at night as they lie down in the forests and fields. Last sound I'll make, if I can still speak at the end, my palindrome, sword, storm wind.
That's just so moving, and I just love the way it starts with the wow and the 1 minute she's a baby, next minute she's got a driver's license, but you managed to avoid any sentimentality. Does she like the poem?
I think so. I mean, I think she's read most of my books, and, mostly people, when they're starting out young, worry about their parents reading their work. I worry about my child reading my work, so vetting my work with her is really important to me. I probably have some people that are angry at me. I mean, I can imagine that some people might have a hard time with something that I wrote, but, it's my story to tell.
It is.
Too. Yeah. They're welcome to tell theirs.
That's a good way of looking at it, I think.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about your latest collection.
Well, I have a new book called Now We're Getting Somewhere. It's only available in hardcover right now, but the paperback will be out at some point.
Oh, good.
Yeah. It came out during the pandemic, of course, in March 2020. No, wait, it came out this year. I'm sorry. It came out in 2021. So it'll be next year and it'll be in paperback. By then. But the book that's available in the UK, where you are, is Wild Nights, which is a sort of selected poem published by Blood Axe that has samples from a lot of different books.
Yeah, that's a very good overview or introduction to your work, I think. Anything else you'd like to tell us about that you're working on now, or future plans or anything like that?
I'm just trying to write some poems, really. I've been slowly working on a new essay collection after Bukowski in a Sundress, which was my sort of memoir in essays about the writing life and my mother and being a daughter and, lots of different things around that. But, and I have some new essays, but I've been very slow about it and not really inspired. And there's something I want to get back to, but always I want to write poems. I've just gone through a series of upheavals with moving and lots of things have been happening recently, and now I'm finally trying to get settled down to do some new work.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing some of that coming through the magazines, what have you, at some point. Would you like to read one last poem? Maybe something from the new book?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, this is the last poem in the book, Now We're Getting Somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And I like to say that it's for anyone who has gotten within a mile of thinking about ending their life. It's called Stay. So your device has a low battery and seems to drain faster each day. Maybe you should double your medication. You might feel queasy, but also as if the spatula flattening you to the fry pan has lifted a little. So your breath comes out scorched, so what? Inside, trust me on this, there's a ribbon of beach by a lake. In the sand, fragments of a fossilized creature resembling a tulip. Back in the Paleozoic, online wasn't invented yet, so everyone had to wander alone and miserable through the volcanic wastes, or just glue themselves to a rock, hoping someone would pass by. Now you can sob to an image of your friend a continent away and be consoled. Please wait for the transmissions, however faint. Listen, When a stranger steps into the elevator with a bouquet of white roses not meant for you, they're meant for you.
That's beautiful. That's a really uplifting way to end, I think.
You know, it caused a little bit of a white rose run on. I had a friend who lost an eye recently from a fall, and she and her friends gave her white roses. Because she said she had read that poem to them and said, that's just what I needed at that moment was to hear that poem. And so they bought her a dozen white roses. And then my boyfriend showed up one day with a dozen white roses. And it's become a little sort of thing, you know, rippling out to give people white roses, which has been really lovely.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. I think we all need white roses at the moment anyway,
yes.
don't we, for whatever reason.
Yes, we do.
So that is great. Kim, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's been fantastic.
My pleasure, absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed that. Peter and I will be back with a new episode a bit later in the spring.